Most people see this as yard waste, something to rake up, discard, and trample underfoot without a second thought. Worse, we see it as poisonous. But where modern eyes see a nuisance, the original peoples of this continent saw a feast. This is one of the most abundant foods in North America. For thousands of years, this nut was the primary source of sustenance for entire nations, a food so foundational that cultures were built around its harvest. And yet, we have been taught to fear it. And we are not entirely wrong. Eaten raw, this nut is packed with bitter tannins that can wreck our digestive systems. So how do you transform a toxic nut into food? The question that defined survival for millennia. This process reveals secrets that ancient peoples perfected. A journey that takes days, requires immense patience, and uncovers a level of ingenuity our modern world has almost completely forgotten. This is not just about food, it is about resurrecting lost knowledge. Section 1. The Ancient Supermarket. Foraging and Selection. The journey begins not in a kitchen but in the woods. The forest is the original supermarket, and in the autumn the shelves are stocked. We are looking for oak trees, but it is not as simple as grabbing the first nuts you see. There are two main categories of oaks, and knowing the difference was literally life or death. First, the white oaks. You can identify them by their leaves, which have rounded, smooth lobes. Their acorns are lower in tannins, sometimes described as sweeter. They are less bitter and require less processing. A promising find. Then you have the red oaks. Their leaves tell the story, sharp, pointed lobes tipped with tiny bristles. As their appearance suggests, their chemical defenses are more aggressive. Red oak acorns are loaded with tannins, intensely bitter and inedible without a serious amount of work. So why bother? The answer is reliability. Red oaks produce acorns on a 2-year cycle, meaning they often provide a harvest even when the white oaks fail. This deep ecological knowledge, understanding the boom and bust cycles of nature, was not trivial. It was the key to a stable food supply. But the knowledge went deeper still. Not all oak species are equal. Tan oak and black oak produced large acorns with low moisture content and exceptional nutrition. These were prized above all others. Live oak packed more protein but produced erratically from year to year. Valley oak required the most drying work for the least nutritional return. This was not guesswork. Centuries of observation taught which trees to harvest first, which to save for lean years, and which to leave for wildlife. Ecological intelligence written into cultural memory. But here is what separates gathering from true mastery: forest management. California tribes did not just harvest oaks. They cultivated them, controlled burns, cleared underbrush, eliminated pests, and promoted healthier, more productive trees. They were not passive foragers. They were forest farmers, managing ecosystems on a scale we are only now recognizing as sophisticated agriculture. A single mature oak could produce over 500 pounds of acorns in a good year. Through careful management, they maximized these harvests. Today, the ground is littered with acorns from a stand of northern red oaks. This is what a caloric windfall looks like. The first task is gathering, and you are in a race against squirrels, deer, and jays. You quickly learn the rules, refined over centuries. A healthy acorn feels heavy and solid. The cap should pop off easily. You avoid any with tiny, perfect holes, the exit wounds from acorn weevil larvae that have eaten the nut from the inside. This sorting is the first critical step. Many Native American tribes, especially in California where acorns were a staple for a majority of the indigenous population, did not just forage. They practiced a form of agriculture. Back from the forest, one final quality check remains. This ancient technique appears across cultures. The float test. Good acorns sink, bad ones float. It is simple physics. A weevil-eaten or rotted acorn has air pockets where solid nut meat should be. The duds rise to the surface and are skimmed off. Every bad acorn caught here saves hours of wasted processing later. Once sorted, these acorns faced another journey: storage. Native Californians built sophisticated granaries, elevated structures 3 to 4 feet in diameter and up to 10 feet high. The borders were lined with aromatic wormwood to repel insects, and the top was capped with water-resistant incense cedar bark. The tannins we are trying to remove? They were actually the acorn's built-in preservative, allowing storage for up to a decade. A family of 5 would need over a ton of acorns annually, 500 pounds per person. These were not temporary shelters, these were food banks, infrastructure for abundance. After a few hours, you end up with several pounds of promising red oak acorns. The easy part is over. Now the real work begins. Section 2, Breaking Through, the labor of shelling and grinding. With the acorns sorted, the next stage is pure, back-breaking labor, shelling. The ancient tools were simple and versatile, a stone to hold the nut and a hammerstone for a sharp, precise tap. The goal is to crack the hard outer shell without pulverizing the nut meat inside. It takes practice. Too hard and you smash it. Too soft and the shell just shrugs it off. You learn to feel for the satisfying crack of a clean break. The shell splits, revealing the nut meat covered in a thin, papery skin called a testa. This skin is also full of tannins and has to be peeled off. The work continues for hours, tapping, cracking, and peeling. It is repetitive, meditative work. It is easy to imagine this as a communal activity. Elders with practiced hands, children learning the rhythm of the hammerstone, a time for stories and shared knowledge. A bucket of whole acorns quickly shrinks to a modest bowl of nut meats. It is a visceral lesson in the sheer volume of raw material required. It breeds a profound respect for the resource. Once shelled, the nuts are ready for grinding. The historical tool for this was the mortar and pestle. Not the small kind in your kitchen, but heavy, formidable tools of stone. Archaeological sites across North America are dotted with bedrock mortars, large rocks with deep bowls worn into them from centuries of use. These were the heart of the village kitchen. Lacking a 1,000-year-old bedrock mortar, we use a heavy stone version. The process is a percussive crushing. The pestle is lifted and dropped, slowly pulverizing the nuts with a dull, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. Slowly, the chunks become a coarse meal, then a finer flour. The flour is a pale tan color, but it carries a sharp, acrid smell. That is the smell of tannins. At this stage, the flour is still very much a fine powder of poison. Your mouth would pucker with overwhelming bitterness if you tasted it. The finer the grind, the more efficiently the tannins can be leached out. So the work continues, pounding, scraping, and pounding again. Your arms ache, and you develop a deep, personal understanding of the term daily grind. After what feels like an eternity, we have a few pounds of acorn flour ready for the most magical part of its transformation. Section 3, The Wisdom of Water, the multi-day detoxification. This is where the true genius of the ancient process reveals itself. We have a flour rich in calories locked behind a chemical defense. The key to unlocking it is simple: water. The process is called leaching, and its purpose is to wash away the water-soluble tannins. Native American tribes perfected multiple primary methods. The cold water method is a slow, gentle, multi-day journey. Traditionally, it was done in a running stream, with the flour held in a woven basket or sand pit as the water percolated through it. We are replicating this by placing our flour in a large glass jar and filling it with cold water. Within minutes, the transformation is visible. The water starts to turn the color of weak tea, then deepens to a reddish brown. That color is the poison, leaving the nut. After a few hours, we pour off the tannin-stained water, add fresh water, stir and repeat, and repeat. The first few changes are dramatic. As the days go on, the water turns from dark brown to amber, then to a pale yellow. How do you know when the process is done? The taste test. A tiny pinch on the tongue. For days, the puckering bitterness is still there. Not yet. The process teaches patience on a profound level. You work on nature's schedule. For our red oak flour, this takes nearly 4 days and almost 30 changes of water. Finally, the taste test reveals something different. The bitterness is gone. The flour has a mild, slightly sweet, nutty flavor. Success. A 2021 study published in the journal Foods analyzed the nutritional composition of acorn flour from multiple Quercus species. The researchers found that properly processed acorn flour contains 5 to 7 times more dietary fiber than wheat flour, with approximately 9.5 to 15% fiber content compared to wheat's 2 to 3%. The study also documented that acorn flour is exceptionally rich in unsaturated fatty acids, with approximately 80% of its fat content being heart-healthy unsaturated fats. Additionally, the mineral profile showed significantly higher levels of potassium, calcium, magnesium, and iron compared to conventional grain flours. This was not just survival food, this was nutritionally superior food. If this deep dive into forgotten knowledge is valuable to you, a quick like helps us continue resurrecting these incredible stories of human ingenuity. Much appreciated. The second method is hot water leaching. It is much faster, hours instead of days. You bring water to a boil, add the flour, and let it boil for 15 to 20 minutes. Then you strain it, discard the dark water, and repeat. But there is a trade-off. The heat cooks the starches, so hot leached flour loses its ability to thicken into a porridge or act as a binder. The choice of method depended on the intended use, another layer of sophisticated culinary knowledge. And here is a piece of wisdom learned through bitter experience. Never start with boiling water on raw, unleached acorns. Beginning with hot water can cause a chemical reaction that permanently binds tannins to the starches, making them impossible to remove. You must choose your method from the beginning. Start with cold water and stay cold throughout, or use only hot water for the entire process. But never begin hot on raw acorns. This is non-negotiable. And there was yet another method, nearly lost to history. In Sardinia, and among some Pomo tribes, clay became the secret weapon. Red clay mixed with acorn meal in specific ratios, 1 part clay to 8 parts acorns, then cooked with wood ash could remove up to 77% of tannins without water leaching. But this only worked if the final product was baked at high heat. The clay actually absorbed the tannins chemically. This technique required deep mineralogy knowledge we are only now beginning to understand. And that brown, tannin-rich water we are pouring off? It was not waste. Nothing was waste. That water became medicine, a scalp treatment and hair rinse. The astringent properties that made it inedible made it perfect for treating skin conditions and minor infections. Some tribes used it in leather tanning, others used it as a base for medicinal preparations. Every part of the process had value. Every step served multiple purposes. After days of soaking, our cold-leached flour is a thick, waterlogged paste. To make it usable, we squeeze out as much water as possible, leaving a dense, damp cake of acorn meal. The sharp warning scent is gone, replaced by a clean, earthy smell of pure potential. The poison has been washed away. Now it is time to apply the final element, fire. Section 4. The Transformation. From nut to meal. We have arrived at the final glorious stage, cooking. Roasting is what will develop the deep, complex flavors that turn a survival food into a delicacy. First, we will make toasted flour. We spread the damp meal on a baking sheet and put it in a low-temperature oven, around 170 degrees Fahrenheit or 75 degrees Celsius, to gently dehydrate and toast it. The house fills with an incredible aroma, like roasting chestnuts and fresh bread. After about 2 hours, the pale, damp meal has become a dry, sandy brown flour. This is the product of all that labor. Next, we will roast some whole acorns. We prepared a small batch of white oak acorns, leaching them in halves. We toss them in a hot, dry cast-iron skillet over a fire. They sizzle, crackle, and pop. We keep the pan moving constantly. Within minutes, they go from pale cream to a deep roasted chestnut color, glossy from their own oils. They look irresistible. A 2018 study from the Korean Journal of Food Science and Technology examined the chemical changes that occur during acorn roasting. The researchers discovered that roasting at temperatures between 160 and 180 degrees Celsius for 15 to 20 minutes triggers the Maillard reaction, which creates over 40 unique flavor compounds not present in raw acorns. These compounds include pyrazines, which give the nutty aroma, and furans, which contribute caramel-like sweetness. The study also found that roasting increases antioxidant activity by up to 68%, while making the remaining nutrients more bioavailable. The transformation is not just culinary, it is chemical optimization. But the most traditional use for acorn flour, especially in California, was a porridge or mush, known as woodwidish by the Cahuilla or nupa by the Miwok. This was the daily bread, the foundational meal. Making it was a mark of skill. Flour and water were mixed in a cooking basket. Then superheated stones lifted directly from a fire were dropped in. The mixture would boil almost instantly and had to be stirred constantly with a special wooden paddle to keep the hot stones from burning through the basket. We will make our own version. We mix our toasted acorn flour with cold water in a pot to make a slurry, then heat it, stirring constantly. Because we used the cold leach method, the starches are active. The liquid slowly transforms into a thick, glossy, smooth porridge, the color of rich chocolate. After about 15 minutes, it is ready. We have now taken a toxic nut and transformed it into roasted flour, whole roasted nuts, and a steaming traditional porridge. Now, only one thing is left to do. Section 5, the verdict and the reflection. This is the moment of truth. After days of foraging, cracking, grinding, leaching, and roasting, it is time to taste the fruits of our labor. First, the whole roasted acorns. They have a fantastic snap. The texture is crisp and crunchy, not mealy at all, and the flavor is incredible. It is deeply nutty, somewhere between a roasted chestnut and a hazelnut, but with an earthy complexity that is entirely its own. There is zero bitterness. You immediately understand why these were a prized food. Next, the porridge. It is thick, smooth, and a deep, glossy brown. The flavor is much milder, but still nutty and slightly sweet. It is a comforting, subtle taste. The texture is the biggest surprise, incredibly smooth and creamy, almost gelatinous. It is a perfect neutral base like polenta or grits. You can imagine it served with venison or dried berries. This was the caloric engine for entire cultures. This is not poverty food, it is substantial and nourishing. Secret 6. The acorn oil, liquid gold. They nearly forgot, but there is one more secret the ancient peoples mastered, one we did not explore today. Some tribes discovered that acorns yielded a golden oil comparable in quality to olive oil. Southeastern tribes would boil whole acorns and skim the oil that floated to the surface. California tribes ground acorns first, then pressed them. This oil became cooking fat, hair pomade, and medicine for burns and wounds. Some oak species contain over 30% oil, as much as the finest olives. A 2004 study published in the European Journal of Lipid Science and Technology analyzed acorn oil from multiple Quercus species. The researchers found that acorn oil composition is remarkably similar to olive oil, with oleic acid comprising 60 to 70% of the fatty acid profile. The oil also contains significant amounts of linoleic acid, vitamin E, and plant sterols. The study concluded that acorn oil is nutritionally comparable to, and in some metrics superior to, commercial olive oil. Yet this knowledge nearly vanished. Entire economies could have been built around acorn oil. Secret number 7. The fermented acorn cheese. One final revelation. Some tribes took this even further. They fermented acorn flour, creating something called chintan nuol, essentially an acorn cheese. Lactofermentation preserved the flour while multiplying its nutritional value, adding beneficial bacteria and increasing vitamin content. The fermentation process broke down complex proteins into more digestible forms and created B vitamins that were not present in the raw flour. It was food preservation meets food enhancement, thousand-year-old probiotic technology. What started as a simple question, what happens when you roast acorns, became a profound lesson in respect. You cannot go through this process without developing a deep admiration for the people who perfected it. The knowledge required is immense. You need to be a botanist, an ecologist, a tool maker, a chemist, and a chef. This was not primitive knowledge. This was a highly advanced, integrated system of food production. The people who mastered the acorn were not merely surviving, they were thriving. They had unlocked one of the most abundant food sources on the continent and built a rich, stable culture around it. To us, this was a challenging, week-long project. To them, it was the rhythm of life. We used a modern oven and a metal pot. They used fire-heated stones and baskets, so finely woven they could hold water. Our small bowl of porridge feels like a monumental achievement. For them, it was simply Tuesday's dinner. We processed a few pounds as an experiment. For them, this was infrastructure. The granaries that held tons of acorns, the forest management systems that increased harvests, the oil presses, the fermentation techniques, the medicinal uses of every byproduct. We call this survival food, but that is our poverty of imagination speaking. This was civilization food, complex, sophisticated, sustainable. The difference between us and them is not technology, it is relationship. They knew the forest as a partner, not a resource, and in that knowing, they created abundance we are only beginning to rediscover. The greatest transformation was not what happened to the acorns, it is what happens to your perspective. You stop seeing the forest as just a park and start seeing it as it truly is, a pantry, a pharmacy, and a home. This journey is a powerful reminder that ancient wisdom holds lessons in patience, ingenuity, and respect for nature that our modern world desperately needs to relearn. The forgotten feast is still there, waiting. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you believe this kind of knowledge is worth preserving, subscribe for more explorations into our forgotten past. And let us know in the comments. Have you ever tried cooking with wild foods? We would love to hear your stories. Be curious and be well.